Welcome to Corporate Warrior, the podcast that brings you the best advice on how to improve your health, optimize performance, and maximize productivity. With your host, Lawrence Neal.
This podcast is brought to you by hituni.com. That's hituni.com. HitUni is an e-learning course provider specializing in high-intensity training for personal trainers and for people looking to learn how to apply the principles of HIIT to their own training for best results. It comes highly recommended by Body by Science author Dr. Doug McGuff, Discover Strength CEO Luke Carlson, MedX Precision Fitness owner Blair Wilson, HIIT expert Drew Bay, and the founder of Living La Vida Low Carb, Jimmy Moore. It was founded by author and high-intensity training master personal trainer Simon Shawcross. Simon has 15 years experience and has supervised over 15,000 workouts. Due to a combination of demand and a lack of quality in certification programs in the fields of high-intensity training, Simon and his team spent the last 3 years developing top-quality courses that will educate fitness professionals and participants to enable them to train individuals and themselves in the safest manner and produce best results. HitUni has been put together using knowledge from the very best minds in the field of exercise, including Skylar Tanner, James Steele, Dr. Doug McGuff, Drew Bay, John Little, Mike Mensa, Arthur Jones, Dr. Ellington Darden, and many more. The courses are delivered online through the website, where you can learn via a variety of multimedia materials at your own pace and convenience. The online video presentations are engaging and make learning fun. Online support and a discussion forum are provided to resolve any sticking points and enable you to share ideas and ask for help. Depending on whether you want to become a personal trainer, are already a personal trainer who wants to upskill, or if you're a keen HIIT participant that is eager to learn more about how you can apply HIIT to your own workouts for maximum benefit, there are several great value courses to choose from. I am personally partway through the PT course and I'm really enjoying it. I primarily wanted to do the course to learn more about how to apply HIIT to my own training for better results. The courses are really easy to follow, and each section is organized into bite-sized chunks that give you a real sense of achievement after you complete each one. To get your exclusive Corporate Warrior 10% discount on any course you purchase, simply head on over to hituni.com, that's hituni.com, and enter the coupon code CW10, that's CW and the number 10. So again, head on over to hituni.com, hituni.com, pick your course and enter the coupon code CW10. Thanks very much for your support. Hello, ladies and gents. This is Lawrence Neal, and welcome to another episode of Corporate Warrior, where it is my job to interview world-class experts on exercise like high-intensity strength training, health, performance, and business to identify the exercises, diets, the training principles, books, and resources that you can use to stimulate the best results for your body and your business. Guests include high-intensity strength training experts like Dr. Doug McGuff, legendary personal trainers like David Landau, New York Times best-selling authors like Ben Greenfield, nomadic fitness entrepreneurs, exercise scientists, nutrition geeks, elite adventure racers, and so on. My next guest is the one and only co-author of Body by Science, Dr. Doug McGuff, who's coming on for the show for the third time. Doug became interested in exercise at the age of 15 when he first read Arthur Jones' Nautilus Training Bulletin No. 2. His interest in exercise and biology led him into a career in medicine. After a lot of studying and some years practicing medicine in 1995, Doug moved to Seneca, South Carolina, where he joined the Blue Ridge emergency physicians with whom he continues to practice full-time emergency medicine. Throughout his career, Doug maintained his interest in high-intensity exercise. Doug realized a lifelong dream when he opened Ultimate Exercise in November 1997, where he and his instructors continue to explore the limits of exercise through their personal training of clients. As mentioned, Doug is the author of the hugely popular health and fitness book, Body by Science. More recently, Doug, alongside Dr. Robert Murphy, published The Primal Prescription, Surviving the Sick Care Sinkhole. This is an expose on medical care, how to get the best care when you really need it, and it's a prescription for wellness, longevity, and personal accountability. In this interview, we cover a lot, including Doug's views on claims that multiple sets coax greater hypertrophy, the importance of adapting your workouts to the stresses encountered around that time, the caloric requirements to support maximum hypertrophy, and much, much more. All the show notes and links will be in the usual place on corpwarrior.com. That's corpwarrior.com. This will redirect you to the homepage, which is 15minutescorporatewarrior.com, which, as I always say, is far too long to remember. So without further ado, please enjoy this awesome interview with Dr. Doug McGuff. Sweet. Okay, excellent. Let's go. So, you were in Germany recently for that high intensity training conference, which I did actually want to come along, and I would have loved to, but I have this kind of biannual basketball event with a group of friends that I absolutely love because we play a team. It's it's just for fun, we play a younger team, and then we go for dinner afterwards. And I see these guys very rarely, and it sounds really like, well, surely your passion should be with high intensity training, but I had to call the shots on that one and decided to stay home. Anyway, but I read your post about James Steele's findings, which James Steele's talked to me about that kind of stuff before in terms of how the modality doesn't really matter so much. What other insights did you gather from the event, if any, in addition to that? I don't know whether you want to keep these secret for blog posts to come or if there's any you want to share.
No secrets at all. If anything, it's hard to find time to write a meaningful blog post, so letting the cat out of the bag, so to speak, doesn't bother me at all. The main thing I came away from after attending that conference is that strength training properly done is even better than I thought it was, and I thought it was amazingly good at baseline. Just the literature that was presented there just left me with the feeling that strength training applied on a population basis would probably be the most profound public health intervention that could ever happen. That's what I came away with, just hearing one speaker after the next. Now, you got to understand that at that conference, I was the only non-university researcher scientist speaking at the thing. So, I kind of felt like I was going to be up there using my hands to give a little shadow puppet show compared to the other people that were there. But it was an immense honor to be there. It was an incredibly well-attended and well-run show, the best I've ever been at, I think. And the speakers were all just stellar. And while they weren't there to be motivational at all, this was very much a scientific conference. It motivated the hell out of me just because of how profoundly good strength training is. I mean, it's just really neat stuff.
Yeah, that's making me wish I'd attended now.
Sorry. I'm sure it was fun, though.
Sure. No, it was. That's really fascinating, and I'm looking forward to kind of hearing more about it. Congratulations on publishing your new book, The Primal Prescription.
Yeah, appreciate that. I just got a copy of it recently, and I got to say, and this is no self-promotion, and it is awesome. It turned out way better than I even imagined that it could. And a lot of that is almost, it has a lot to do with the co-author, Bob Murphy, a brilliant economist, and it also has a lot to do with Mark Sisson's production team and Denise Minger, who served as our editor. I mean, they just did a fantastic job turning what for me was sort of a madman in the cabin in the woods manifesto into something that was actually readable. So I'm pretty happy with it.
I'm yet to purchase a copy, but I did look at the Amazon allows you to kind of get a sneak peek. And I saw there's two sections that kind of stood out. It says lead by your primal example and living healthy and free. So in those sections, I'm making an assumption here, but have you provided the readers with kind of exercise and diet advice as a means to avoid the kind of healthcare trap or never have that requirement in the first place?
Yes, that's the basis of those chapters, although they touch on them relatively superficially compared to the depth that I go into on the exercise and body by science and the depth that Mark Sisson goes into in his primal blueprint. It's more of a skimming across the surface of that than it is a deep dive. But it is to get across to the reader that as far as the human organism is concerned, that health and functioning at a high level are our default state and our birthright, and that to get to that only requires some self-discipline and some metacognition to actually think about what you're doing.
Yeah. Joe, I had a friend of mine said he bought it recently. He's a big fan of yours. And I said to him, I didn't realize you were so into, the healthcare system in the US, or are you more interested in, buying it for those chapters we just mentioned? And he said, no, not really interested in any of those. I just love reading what the guy has to say. So
that's pretty amazing, and it's very humbling, to tell you the truth. That's neat to hear.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about ArxFit equipment? And how much more effective is it, if at all, than traditional MedX or Nautilus machines?
I've only been on it a few times, and the latest iterations that have a lot more computer feedback, I've not really spent much time at all on. Maybe I've done 1 or 2 sets on. So on the positive side, now that it has some sort of feedback, you can actually train people with the brake motor and know that they're giving you good effort. Originally, before there was that computer feedback, if someone wanted to fake their way through it, they could. But now with that computer feedback, that is now not possible. It does allow you to kind of quantitate the degree of effort that's being put out and also the degree of inroad that's occurring. Having said that, I've not used it enough to provide a truly in-depth or intelligent discussion of it. I can tell you my prejudices are still always toward gravity-based resistance, just because I'm old school and that's kind of what I came up with. And I think that the biomechanics in some of the weight-based exercise equipment is more adaptable as far as equipment design than what's available in that technology. But honestly, I don't have enough firsthand experience training with it to say, oh yeah, it's the best thing since sliced bread, or I would replace all my all my weight-based equipment with it. But I certainly think that it is an effective way to apply high-intensity training.
Would it be right for me to assume that because you haven't, as you said, explored using it more frequently, that you perhaps don't think it's going to be much more advantageous than what you currently do?
Yeah, probably that's accurate to say. But it's probably also accurate to say that all of the expensive equipment that I have in my facility where I train clients, I also do not believe that it's necessarily going to produce much better results than a barbell set in your garage and freehand exercise. Because the equipment used, the protocol applied, is not necessarily the rate limiting factor in terms of results ever. The rate limiting factor in terms of results, in terms of what you see aesthetically, is very much genetically determined. And that's the one thing that James Steele's presentation was able to show, is that modality is not necessarily the most important thing, but the amount of effort that you put in, perceived effort or demonstrated effort, is the most important component. And that can be achieved on all variety of equipment or a complete lack of equipment.
That's a good answer. I interviewed Keith Norris recently, who's a big fan of you. Obviously, you guys know each other very well.
Yeah, we went so far back that we didn't even realize that we did. We actually attended a seminar at an Oshman sporting goods store probably around 1977. And we were in the room together and didn't know it until, 30 years later.
That's incredible. I was born 10 years after that. So Keith was a really interesting to chat to. And I played devil's advocate quite a lot in terms of trying to understand, I guess, his thinking around exercise and challenge him, which he responded quite graciously. And he said that he felt that two to three or even more sets to failure for a single exercise is more productive for hypertrophy than one set to failure. And his view is that this helps prime the central nervous system. What do you think about this notion?
I think that's true for Keith. And I think it's true potentially for a lot of people. And the real answer is it depends on who you are. And you're going to have to figure that out for yourself. And the only way you can figure it out for yourself is give it a try and see how it goes. And I certainly have. And I think that there are multiple genetic modulators that determine whether you're going to be a person that responds as he describes, or if you're a person that's only going to produce any appreciable hypertrophy if you really consolidate your volume and frequency more. And in general, I think a significant swatch of the population actually will do better at a lower volume and frequency. But at the same time, there is a segment of the population that is going to respond to a somewhat higher level of training volume in terms of hypertrophy. And where this argument tends to get skewed is a selection bias that occurs, is that the people that are really going to demonstrate the kind of visual impact that we like to see from our training are also that subsegment of the population that will benefit from a higher volume of training. But they're a fairly small subsegment, but they get overrepresented because they produce the results that we want to see. Now, there are all the rest of us that are not endowed with what Keith is endowed with. And when we try to apply that higher volume to that kind of person, it reaps negative rewards. So there's a significant segment of the population that if they're going to produce any results in terms of hypertrophy or visual impact, they are going to have to really be careful with their exercise volume in order to produce those results. And when they produce those results, they're going to be much more modest. But if you took that subsegment of the population and tried to apply a higher volume and frequency to them, they would produce negative results. So there is a whole continuum of how people respond to exercise, and there's a whole continuum of volume and frequency that can produce results across that entire continuum, but finding an alignment between what works best for your particular genotypic expression is going to be a matter of experimentation.
Good stuff. Okay. In your facility, do you always start clients on the Big Five? And if so, how long do they stay on that protocol, generally speaking?
So the answer is, in my facility, because of the variety of equipment that we have, initially we will start them on a Big Five that may not necessarily be the 5 exercises listed in the book. And this is one thing that I had to say over and over in Germany, is that the Big 5 exercises that are in Body by Science are not there because I thought those exercises are particularly special or important or essential, but simply were selected because those are big compound movements that require very little motor skill to carry out at a high level of effort. So in other words, those were selected in the book because they would, to some extent, cover the entire musculature of the body, and from a motor learning standpoint are very easy movements to carry out and to learn, so that the person doing them can focus their energy on where the results really come from, and that is the effort, and not necessarily on the complexity of the movement. So having said that, I have to say there's nothing special or magical about the Big Five. But there is something important about selecting a volume of exercise that matches the intensity of the exercise. And if it is supervised exercise by a knowledgeable instructor that is able to generate a high level of intensity, something in that volume range, anywhere between 3 and 9 exercises, is going to be adequate. But it doesn't have to be the Big Five. So we start off with something that is either the Big Five or very close to it. And then over time, because of the variety of equipment we have, we'll set up 2 or 3 different routines that the client will cycle through. So they're not hitting the same exact movements on a week-by-week basis, if that makes any sense. Whether to switch from big movements to a combination of big and isolation movements is something that you can decide based on their workout record. If they start to really stall out in terms of progress or start to feel like they are overly fatigued, tired, or irritable in the days that follow a workout, then you know that you can kind of start to make adjustments on the movements that you're using so that it doesn't have such a negative impact over the time span in question.
Because last time we were talking, I was talking to you about two-way split and the three-way split, which I'd kind of advanced onto. And I kind of, I made the assumption that I think I may have moved to the three-way split a bit soon, and not perhaps done the two-way split long enough to really, I think I made the assumption that I was doing too much work and not getting enough recovery too quickly. So anyway, I've gone back to a two-way split, and I've noticed what happened with me is I plateaued for several weeks, for probably about 4 or 5 weeks in terms of my time under load was the same or similar. And then what I did yesterday is I micro-loaded the resistance. So I added, say, 2 pounds per exercise, and I exceeded my time under load significantly by 10 to 15 seconds, despite the resistance being higher. That's quite unusual. I mean, to be fair, I did have someone supervising me, and I don't normally. And obviously, I'm assuming the Hawthorne effect came into play, or other variables I'm not aware of. But what do you think about that? Do you have an explanation for that?
There are several explanations to it. One is that after you've been doing this for a while, you will bump up to an apparent lack of progress. That may not be anything intrinsic to your body or volume, frequency, and recovery. In other words, depending on the equipment you use, even with the best equipment, once you reach a certain level of resistance, further progression is inhibited by the fact that no machine is perfect in terms of its strength curve. There's always going to be some area where there's a sticking point, either because of friction or a mismatch of the strength curve, leverage factors with regard to your own body. But in any case, whatever this is a little bit of a speed bump that's always there. Well, when you first start out in your program, you're pushing a Mini Cooper over the speed bump because you're not using a lot of resistance. But as you get stronger and all of a sudden you're having to push a transfer truck over that speed bump can become the limiting factor in your continued progression. But if you're still applying good intensity and good form and good effort, and you're stuck at a weight and you're stuck at a time under load, from a real standpoint, your strength and conditioning may still be improving, although you're not able to demonstrate it on paper because of the limitations of the equipment. And the mistake that can be made at that point is to think, this has something to do with the biology between my recovery, volume, and frequency, and then start really paring down on those things when it's not really time for that. So there's that. The other thing that, the three-way versus the two-way, versus a full body thing is I want people to think about that not as a forever progression or whittling down of volume and frequency, but rather something that you should ebb and flow between. So after a period of time of doing a 3-way split, the demands of that will always be much less, and you will have built up this reserve of recovery that you can then tap by going back to a 2-way split or even full body routines. So you can kind of ebb and flow back and forth between 3-way splits, 2-way splits, full body routines, and over time, over the course of a year, you may spend a few weeks at this, a few months at that, back to this for a few weeks based on how you feel. And I know Keith probably talked to you about his notion of auto-regulation.
Yeah, we touched on that.
Within the workout and within a shorter context of time. But if you take an aerial view of that and stretch it out over the course of a training year, it's not that you start out with a big 5 and then you go to the big 3 plus a small 2 and then just forever narrow down your volume and frequency in a linear type fashion. But I think that more of a ebb and flow based on the demands of your life and how you're feeling, whether you feel like you've built up a reserve of recovery that you can now tap into, is sort of, once you get to become a little bit of a veteran at applying this sort of exercise protocol, you then have the experience to kind of slide back and forth in this ebb and flow fashion. And I think over the long term, it will result in better progress.
Got it. So in terms of recovery, how do you gauge when you've realized you've overdone it? I mean, is it just a feeling, or is it like, okay, well, my time under load was significantly less this time around on this particular exercise, and that's kind of a quantitative way of measuring it?
Well, that's one way. However, you got to be careful with that. And I mean, the whole time under load concept and everything that we discussed in Body by Science is very useful during the early stages of training, but it can come back and bite you in the butt, because once you reach that asymptotic level where it's very hard to progress weight, what I particularly like people that are training themselves to do is at that point, don't worry so much about progression or even time under load. You've now gotten to a very meaningful level of resistance, and you may not be able to push much beyond that because of the limitations and the mechanics of the equipment itself. At that point, what you should really focus on is internalizing the whole process, to really focus on the muscle and its contraction and making sure that you are doing this in the most demanding way possible, that is as hard as possible, that results in the greatest amount of fatigue in the shortest amount of time possible. And what that may actually mean is, if you are perfecting your form and performance more and more, you may actually see your time under loads get shorter rather than longer. But once you know that that's what you're doing, that you're at that stage of training, that's not such a big deal anymore, because you really want to show real progress and not become a workout accountant. So not get so married to the whole weight and time under load thing and trying to force that process along when you've reached this asymptotic level where the equipment really won't let you be on that steep slope like you were in the beginning, if that makes any sense to you.
It does. No, it makes absolute sense. I've had guests on the show say that if a trainee feels like they can do another set in a particular exercise, and they should, if they feel like maybe they didn't get as much out of the set as they wanted. Counter to that, last time we spoke, one of the things you said at the end of the interview was, maybe do a little bit less than you're capable of, as one of the kind of tips. Which kind of contradicts what I said earlier. So what are your thoughts about this point in general?
Well, that's also contextual. And what I mean by that is and this is kind of borne out by some of the literature presented at the Keiser conference about whether these really advanced or super high intensity techniques, breakdown sets, forced repetitions, pre-exhaust, every time that's really been formally tested to see if it bore fruit in the terms of increased muscle size, strength, or what have you, it really doesn't.
Yeah.
So I think what I'm saying by that is there's a threshold that you cross that seems to be adequate stimulus to set into motion the adaptive process. And in strength training, I think the point where you start to bog down during the set, where you start to lose speed no matter how hard you're pushing, you're probably in that realm there. So anything from there to complete and utter abject muscular failure is probably not necessarily producing proportionate dividends to go there. So having said that, I guess I just don't think it's necessary to go totally crazy and make yourself utterly and completely wiped out to produce enough of a stimulus to have an adaptation. And in fact, going there may actually end up reaping negative rewards. To answer the other part of your question is, if someone completes a set and they feel like that set has been inadequate in terms of producing a stimulus, I may suggest that it's a good idea to pay attention to that feeling, because failure, muscular failure, or getting to the point where you can no longer move the weight, is not an absolute event. It's a conditional event. And if you're training on equipment that has a greater degree of friction than you're aware of, or a strength curve that's mismatched to the muscle being trained, or perhaps even to your own peculiar body proportions, you may reach that failure point, the point where you can no longer move the resistance, at a point where you've not really produced a significant depth of fatigue. And as a consequence, a drop set or a second set may actually provide some benefit in that context. The best way I can suggest that someone be able to ascertain that is through experience. And if you can ever be trained by a really expert instructor on fairly ideal equipment, you're out of London. If you can go over and train with Simon Shawcross and have him really put you through a really well-supervised workout, if you can use that as a benchmark for the feel that you should have in your body and your muscles as a result of a good set, then you will have what I like to term a baseline or a pop-up timer that you can measure what training feels like under your own supervision to decide whether it's adequate or not. And having experienced that, if you're in a situation where you completed your set, you've reached mechanical failure, but it just feels like it came up short, if you've had the prior experience of what you should feel like, you can replicate that through different means, whether it be rest pause or a second set, a drop set, or whatever. You can go after that sensation that you've experienced before.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I never thought about that. You're kind of using that experience as a benchmark for when you're self-supervised.
Correct.
In fact,
I mean, once you've got an experience with well-supervised workouts on really good equipment, you can auto-regulate yourself to that place with, very suboptimal equipment or no equipment. I mean, I can do a freehand routine that, will decimate you. And, once you've found out how to go there, you can be traveling and go to a hotel gym and walk in and go, well, this looks like shit. But you can still turn it into a really awesome workout because you have that pop-up timer and you can use whatever you got in a way that gets you there.
Yeah. Simon, if you're listening to this, you did promise me that workout, so I'm going to drop you an email about that. Talking about your business, Doug, One of the questions I had submitted was, what advice do you have for someone who has a personal training business and is looking to grow that business?
Well, I'm not certain I'm the best one to give that advice because I've had my one location and I've never found the time to expand to multiple locations. But I know people who have, and if I were to drop out of medicine and do this, I know what I would have in mind. And the first thing I would say is get really well tuned and work all the bugs out at your first location. And then try to save the capital necessary or over time accumulate the equipment necessary and hold in storage what you need to open your second facility. And then once you've accumulated that and you're able to open a second location with the least amount of indebtedness possible, just go ahead and make the jump to that second location. And understand that your success at the first location is going to provide a lot of word of mouth for your second location. And also, there are a lot of people that come to your first location that when you open your second location, that second location is going to be significantly more convenient to about 1/3 or 1/4 to 1/3 of your current clientele at your original location. So clients from your original location will seed your second location and serve as a word of mouth base for growth. And then once you've done that, just repeat and repeat and repeat. But I guess the real key is just to get your model really fine-tuned and protocolized. It has to be something that you can have a protocol, an operations manual, so that you can plug in instructors into the second facility and have it run seamlessly. And that's where really getting your operations tuned in your first facility can make the difference.
What about just taking a step back from that, just growing the user base in a single location?
Well, that's always the best option if you're located in a place that has enough of a population to keep seeding the place. If you find that you have now gone to capacity in that place, and you have the room or the facilities to set up more than one line of equipment so that you can now, effectively double the capacity within your existing facility, as long as you can keep pulling clients that way, that's probably the better option because your overhead costs don't change, but the amount of revenue you're able to generate through there, if you're able to move more people through, will go up. And that is, from a financial standpoint, the best option to take. So I guess that goes back to my original statement, is that if you're not yet there in your first facility, you need to do that first so that you've milked every bit of productivity out of that one location first before you go to replicate.
Okay, good stuff. Moving on to diet. And last time we spoke, you explained about how you can't force the anabolic process along by pushing excess substrate through the body system, which made a lot of sense to me. And in Body by Science, you said about how people should seek adequate nutrition to optimize their results. When you say adequate nutrition, what kind of calorie surplus, if any, do you recommend to someone who wants to optimize for muscular growth?
Very little. Every time I've seen someone try to push the hypertrophy process on the calorie loading side, when you really use more objective measures, DEXA scan, things of that nature, you will see ounces of lean tissue increase right along with pounds of body fat increase.
Yep.
So I think my inclination is to first and foremost get as lean as you want to be over the long term. So I'm talking somewhere for a male between 9 and 11% body fat. you ought to be able to see at least a 4-pack, if not a 6-pack level of leanness. And then once you're there, then try to build muscle on top of that with a very minimal calorie surplus. And if in the process of doing that, you see your level of leanness start to fade, if you see that 6-pack starting to haze out in the mirror, then you are probably pushing the calorie side of the equation too quickly. I think you need to get lean, stay lean, and build size from there. I think the notion of super weight gainer and really pushing on the calorie side of the equation works for very little of the population.
I think that's a fantastic answer. And I loved what you said last time, which was, where, the potentially the caloric surplus and the, these kind of arbitrary measures of, you need 1.5 grams of protein per pound of body weight, all that kind of stuff. Maybe that's necessary if the volume's exceptionally high, which it is in a lot of conventional bodybuilding programs, but we're looking at this in the context of a very infrequent, brief, high-intensity training program, and then the diet changes or could change in accordance with that, which was quite profound, I thought, when you said that. When you came on the show before, you talked about how you used branch-chain amino acids, if I can actually say it, before and after workouts. But when you were on Living La Vida Low Carb with Jimmy Moore, you talked about how you fasted before and after workouts. Now, how has your kind of protocols changed in that respect? Do you still do the BCAAs before and after? Do you still fast? How has that changed, if at all?
Well, I actually do both. And so I try to go into my workouts fasted as much as I can, but I still do the branched chain amino acid, but I'm doing it going into the workout fasted. So there is some literature that suggests that you get a little bit more of an anabolic response when you are able to pretty aggressively deplete glycogen. And there's also some enhancement of amino acid uptake in that context. So it sounds like I'm doing two different things, but I actually do both. I do head into a workout fasted, but at the time of the workout, in the peri-workout period, I'm doing the branched chain amino acid thing. Now, this has a lot of woo-woo factor to it because when you do that sort of thing with yourself and you monitor what you think your results are, you really are just building a gigantic monument to the placebo effect. These N equals 1 experiments are really just monument building to the placebo effect. But I love the placebo effect and I use it to my advantage, and that's really what I would say about that. But I can say this. Earlier you asked me a question about what sort of parameters do you use to decide whether you need more recovery or you've overdone it. And I can tell you that assessment is much harder to make when you're young because your DNA hasn't taken a dump on you yet. You actually have so much reserve capacity that you can actually be completely unaware of the development of an overtraining syndrome because you just have so much more latitude for recovery at that age. So you can be overtrained and not even realize you're overtrained just because of your general ability to absorb punishment. You know, when you're in your 20s and 30s, you can stay out partying all night and go to work the next day. When you get in your 40s and 50s, that kind of goes away. But it makes you a much more, being 40 or 50 and being involved in physical and athletic endeavors really is like being an elite level athlete, Olympic level, Tour de France level athlete. Because those people train out at the very margins. So if their volume frequency, if their recovery is off at all, they feel it because they're at the outer edge of their capability. What happens when you get into your 40s and 50s is that because the aging process, the margins of your recovery get more narrow. So when you have an overtraining state, or if you do a workout that was too high in intensity relative to its volume, you feel for the next 2 or 3 days like you have been run over by a truck. So your ability to monitor volume and frequency and have meaningful feedback about how well tuned you have everything is actually easier at this age than it is when you're younger. It's a lot easier to just really screw it up when you're younger and not be aware that you are.
That's fascinating. Just going back to what you said about, what is the exact protocol for the branch chain amino acids that you follow?
I just buy whatever brand looks good. It's generally I will do 7 to 10 grams of branch chain amino acids, just commercial over the whatever I find in the health food store. Do a dose generally about 45 minutes to an hour before the workout, and then anywhere in the next 1 to 4 hours after the workout, I'll do another one of that. And then typically I will either do another dose right at bedtime or the next morning. And the reason I tell you about my N=1 placebo experiment with that is, and that's what brought up the point about, when you in your 50s and a workout has crossed the threshold of your recovery, you can really feel it the next day.
Right.
And, you also got to throw into the context, you're full on guns a-blazing in your career. You got a wife, you got kids, you got all that comes along with that. So when you overshoot volume and intensity relative to your recovery, it's not a mystery to you in the next couple of days. And what I found is my little placebo experience is that when I do the branch chain amino thing, that I have a lot fewer of those days afterwards. And I can tolerate a higher level of intensity at a given volume better when I do it than when I don't. And it seems like it is very palpable and clear cut to me. But since it is an N=1 experiment, I got to say it could be totally placebo. You could put in, Kool-Aid in there and tell me I'm taking branch chain amino acids, that if I was blinded to it, I might swear by it. So I don't know that to be fact, but it's my experience.
Do you take powdered form or the tablets?
I take the powder form.
Oh, it's gross.
In a thing of water. Yeah. Well, yeah. And if you spill it and you see the dry powder stain that it leaves in the bottom of your sink, you're kind of like, what am I putting in my body here? But
I can't even stomach the powder. I find it absolutely, it's the worst thing it's worse than any protein powder ever tried. The tablets are they're tasteless, so they're fine, but the powder is horrific. I'm very impressed that you're able to stomach it. Or perhaps it's the brand I'm using, I don't know.
Well, it does taste like grape flavored, like you're gargling with grape flavored WD-40, but, it's what it is.
Cool. No, that's great. And I'm going to certainly try out that protocol and, maybe the placebo effect, if that's true, works for me too. Related to this, with the release of the Bulletproof Diet book and popular techniques like carb backloading and stuff like that, I was wondering if there are any additional, I guess if you could call it hacks, dietary or otherwise, that you use to improve your results.
Well, to tell you the truth, my life is so disorganized and chaotic because of the rotating schedule from the ER that being able to invoke any sort of hack is just impossible for me. It just turns into an absolute flail. So what I found is that for things to work for me, I don't like hacks. I can't use hacks. What I like are heuristics. I need very simple thinking guidelines to keep me on track. And from a nutrition standpoint, my simplest heuristic is not thinking about a paleo diet and what foods aren't allowed or this, that, or the other thing. But I try to think of nutrition as being a straight line between the sun and me. Because that's really what nutrition is. And it can be as simple as being out in the sun and converting vitamin D. And I'm sure there are a lot of other nutrient hormonal signals that are being triggered by being in sunlight that we don't even know about yet. Or it can be that the sun is acted upon by plants or phytoplankton, and you can eat those. And you can take sunlight energy in that form, bring it into your body, and it gets used. Or animals eat those plants, and you can eat the animals that ate the plants. Or you can eat the animals that ate the animals that ate the plants. But as long as you stay on that straight line, you're going to be presenting these nutrients to your body, packaged in a way that your body knows how to use from an evolutionary standpoint, and with all the cofactors that are necessary for everything to work synergistically and give you the most impact. So, stated differently, protein derived from eating a steak is probably going to have much more of an anabolic impact than a whey protein that you buy at the grocery store. And the thing is there are nutrients in food, but it's just the ones that we know about. And when we extract those out of the food, we don't know to what extent we're taking them away from the cofactors that really make them work. So my big heuristic is sort of a single ingredient diet. So if you're eating something and it has a list of 10 ingredients on it, you can be pretty certain that a lot of stuff got taken out and added back in a way that may lose a lot of cofactors that really make your food an anabolic substance instead of just caloric energy. And when you do that, your body knows what to do with it in terms of optimizing your body composition, as opposed to, what the hell do I do with this stuff? Oh, well, I guess I'll just look at it in terms of heat energy and store it. Mm-hmm. So that's my heuristic for nutrition.
That's great stuff.
And I have lots of different, very oversimplified thinking rules that guide me in both my training and my nutrition and just lifestyle in general, rather than hacks. Hacks, I don't necessarily, they don't work well for me, because I think hacks are for people with a lot of time on their hand that are able to feel like they can make them work. Because once you get truly busy, they fall by the wayside really quickly.
Do you know, I agree. And I was thinking about this earlier today. You know, there's this big move towards sitting less. And there's quite a lot of, good science coming out from what I've seen, and some intelligent people talking about things you can do, routines at your desk, things you can do to kind of make sure that, that the excessive sitting isn't going to have such a detrimental effect. And I just found that, that similar to what you're saying, it's the heat of the moment, the busyness, that you're just going to forget to do those right. Make those a habit. So I'd rather do things like set rules for myself. Like if I'm going to take a phone call, I'll walk, and right. I'll do it on a hands-free phone. And a lot of the time I'm taking phone calls or making phone calls. So that means that I'm sitting less and my sitting is constantly being interrupted. And I think that's along the same vein of what you're saying. In that right. It's not some of these little, do this routine, do that, unless it's high intensity strength training, of course, don't necessarily, see the test of time. Yeah. And I think, and this is one of the things that Dr. Steele's lecture at Dresden pointed out, is that, even the workout can be reduced away from a hack and more to a heuristic when you just say, every so often you need really high output effort as part of maintaining your normal biological health. And in the background of that, you need a high level of low intensity activity. I mean, we come out of a biological history of, being constantly on the move and intermittently and fairly infrequently really having to put the hammer down. And if you take that as a heuristic for how you're going to try to model your life, then you can kind of fit it in wherever you can. Whereas when you try to do it as a hack, it's just like,
okay, I'm going to try it and I'll do this, and and then it falls by the wayside. And there's so many lectures and podcasts and YouTube videos with a zillion and one different hacks that you just get overwhelmed with the hacks. And what you need is something that's much more simplistic. And I think just having a metacognitive reminder of how you should be doing things is much more effective than a little how-to scenario.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I've got a request from my girlfriend who wants me to ask you this specific question. She's a vegetarian, and she follows the slow carb diet, Tim Ferriss's diet. So what this means is her diet is basically legumes, vegetables, and eggs, but no other animal products. So she'll eat that 6 days a week, and she'll avoid just starches, refined carbohydrate, and sugar. And what she asks is, what supplements, if any, do you think might improve her diet, or are they completely unnecessary? And is there anything else missing, or is there anything in your view that is detrimental eating a diet like that?
Well, obviously what's missing is meat.
I tried to tell her that, yeah.
And, the real question, again, this is sort of a heuristic answer, is that what's happening is you're staying on the low end of the food chain where the energy is not as concentrated. And what happens is as you concentrate energy up the food chain, you're concentrating nutrients that may be much harder to get when you're lower on the food chain and the energy is less concentrated. So, and the real answer is I don't know necessarily that supplementing can make up those deficits, because when you take a supplement, you're just taking these vitamins and things like that may be devoid of the cofactors that come along with them as they get concentrated up the food chain.
Sure.
One thing I would say that might be worthwhile is if she isn't, and it isn't contrary to her dietary regimen, to include some sort of omega-3 supplementation, because with all the plant-based protein, the fatty acids that come along for the ride with that may be more heavily weighted in the omega-6 direction, and potentially some supplementation of the fat-soluble vitamins, particularly vitamin K, unless she's getting that through some other source like natto or something of that nature. Because of a vegan diet, it's harder to get high-quality fats through that diet. Supplementing the fat-soluble vitamins might be worthwhile. So other than that, no. And I think in terms of general diet, just because she is conscious and aware of what she's eating, because she's eating on a philosophical basis, so to speak, health-wise, she's probably light years ahead of your average citizen that just, it's whatever is thrown in the trough in front of them,
Yeah.
Her vegetarianism, is it
ethical?
Related to, it's ethical?
Well, yes. It's that's her kind of reason.
What is her diet on the vegetarian side mostly comprised of? I mean, what is she eating?
So a typical dinner would be butter beans, mashed up. She have a fair amount of, I guess, Kerrygold butter, loads of vegetables. So, broccoli, runner beans, celery, lentils, and then she'll always have eggs. She'll always have eggs in her evening meal, salads at lunch. She'll quite often skip breakfast. If she did do the kind of 30 grams of protein within 30-minute protocol that the slow carb diet suggests, but more often than not, she'll skip breakfast, and then she'll have a cheat day once a week, and she used to go mad, but now she just kind of, probably eats what a normal Western person eats on her cheat day.
Really crave a steak at all, or?
Oh no. Well, I don't know. Occasionally, she suggests, but yeah. Sorry, go on.
My only point in all that is that if the stand is an ethical one, most of the food stuff that vegetarians are relying upon, if you're obtaining it through the grocery store, Almost every vegetable you're eating is obtained through monocrop agriculture, the process of which, almost irrespective of the vegetable in question, kills way more biomass in terms of animal life than actually eating animals ever would. So the amount of biomass killed in the process of clearing the land and harvesting the vegetables to bring it to market actually accounts for more loss of biomass in living creatures than if you were eating steak grown by a grass-fed operation per se. So the ethical side of it, if she ever really gets a hankering for a steak, she can absolve herself of all that guilt, because the real fact of the matter is that eating a vegetarian diet probably results in the more loss of biomass, in terms of animals, than actually eating animals that were intended for consumption.
Thank you for explaining that so articulately, because I've heard that before, and I've heard Drew Bay say it, and I think, I obviously it's whether I have a difference of opinion. I respect her decision to eat a vegetarian. It doesn't bother me, but
I always do too. I mean, people can disagree about those but the truth of the matter is, I really don't care what anyone eats, and I'm always impressed when people are conscious of what they're eating, and they do so with the best of intentions. That's just so impressive to me in a modern culture where there's just so much available that's so tempting. The kind of discipline it takes to take on that sort of dietary rigor is just impressive.
Absolutely.
To me. So I never begrudge it.
Do you know what? It's really interesting you brought that up, because I said to her the other day, I said, the fact that you do the slow carb diet, which is limiting anyway, but then you make it even harder by making it vegetarian, and you're able to do that whilst there's this, calorific food all around you, we're in central London here, is amazing. It is amazing. I couldn't do it, and I kind of follow a more paleo.
But if she ever gets absolutely sick of it and feels like she's going to have a moral crisis, there is ethical animal husbandry for someone that falls off the vegetarian or vegan wagon, that from an animal welfare and saving of animal life would be able to absolve them of all that guilt if they ever want to go that direction. So that's just available should she ever fall off that particular wagon, and she will not have to feel guilty about it if she goes to the right sources.
Yeah, I'll definitely get her to listen to this section of the podcast, because I know she'll get a lot out of that. Okay, cool. So moving on to some kind of more, I guess, bonus questions about you. What have you changed your mind about in the past year regarding health and fitness? I suppose would make sense.
I think probably one of the major things would be, well, actually two things. One is not so much a change on a stance of aerobics or low-intensity exercise, but an actual acknowledgement of the fact that high levels of physical activity are important and are part of our evolutionary background. I think I've become more sensitive to that. And really, when we went to Dresden, from Dresden, I met my family in Paris, and we spent a week, 10 days in Paris.
Oh, you finally made it to Europe.
Yes. And we walked everywhere. I mean, we, on average, walked at least 10 miles per day. And, even though we were eating way more than baseline, I lost significant weight, and I slept better and felt better. Now, also, I'm on vacation, but it really kind of gave me a sense of, this is the kind of background of activity that we're probably really meant for. But having said that, I've also noticed that in my clients and in the people I train, if you get people to a certain level of muscular strength and conditioning, they will start to trend towards that high level of activity spontaneously. You will find that if people have the appropriate muscular conditioning, they will almost spontaneously go to a level of 10,000 steps per day. But my thinking on that being an important backdrop for our evolutionary biology and our health has changed. The other thing that's changed for me is my interpretation of movement speed during exercise. In my place, we've always used a super slow protocol for our clients, try to really keep them in a realm of a 10-second positive excursion, 10-second negative excursion, because all of our equipment is modified for that protocol.
Right.
But what I'm finding is I would rather see that slow speed of movement express itself organically through the intention of how the exercise is initiated and performed. So in the past, we could have some client that would just like, bam, take off and start a set. And then you find yourself focusing all the workout energy on trying to get them to constrain their speed within this 10-second time frame. And what I have found is that more important is how they initiate the movement. If they have a gradual upload of their force that is as gradual and as smooth as possible, and then once the weight cracks and starts to move, if they've done that gradual upload, then the speed takes care of itself organically. And I found that speed will be different based on how ideal the equipment is for slow movement. So if I'm training at a commercial gym and the machine's got a lot of friction, I will still start a very gradual upload of my force and then let the speed express itself organically through my effort. And I find that on really crappy equipment, that may be a 3 or 4 second excursion. On certain movements in my own facility, it may be a 5-second excursion. In others, it may be 10 or 12 seconds. But the important thing isn't that it be within the constraints of a certain time per repetition, but rather that if you start with a very gradual upload and an intent to intensely contract the muscle, speed takes care of itself. So I've kind of taken the horse and put it in front of the cart, whereas before I thought I might have had those things reversed.
Right. What would you change about Body by Science, if anything?
Oh,
I should have sent you these over in advance, probably.
No, because that would ruin it. That would ruin it.
Okay.
I think what I would change about Body by Science would be to make certain that I prefaced to the audience that the Big Five was not chosen because these are the best movements that you can ever do, or this is all you should ever do, or these are in any way special. I wish that I would have spent more time just saying, look, we're choosing these movements so we can cover your whole body and so that you can get started in this program with movements from a motor learning aspect that are easy to perform so you can focus on effort. But that doesn't mean there's anything particularly magical about these. And there are other movements and exercises and equipment out there that over time you can incorporate, and it's okay. Because I run into so many people that have read the book that are like completely married to the Big Five and will not do anything else for fear that it's going to somehow wreck the protocol and ruin everything. That is one of the things that I would change there. The other would be some sort of elaboration on the fact that alteration in the protocol and alterations in volume may be necessary if you're using less than ideal equipment. But that part of the deal would be very hard to do in the context of a book that has to go through editing and be published commercially. That's covered some in the question and answer book, but to some extent, I would try to at least touch upon that. The global metabolic conditioning probably wouldn't change anything about that, and would like to emphasize that even more, because that's where more bang for the buck comes from. And if there was ever to be a second edition of that book, I would weave into the global metabolic conditioning the new science on myokines and how muscle is such an active endocrine organ and how it crosstalks with other organs. And that explains why we're seeing all these other health benefits that we couldn't previously explain.
Yeah, that's fascinating stuff. Have you got any ideas of publishing any future books? And can you give us any, if so, give us any kind of, I don't know, previews on what sort of topics you might cover?
Yeah, I do want to write another book on exercise. And I'm kind of accumulating the knowledge to do it now. And I want to take sort of, still in the body by science type of vein, but this time have the science be myokines.
Oh, cool.
And how strength training produces all these amazing health benefits that we're just now becoming aware of, or at least understanding the mechanism of, but use the science of myokines to show how, from a public health perspective, to just lift weights, to just do strength training would have such a profound effect on the health of the population as a whole. And to do that, you have to acknowledge that just getting someone to lift weights in any sort of fashion or protocol is where you want to go with this. Because once you start getting married to protocol and saying this way is the only way, really all I want to do is to get people to go pick up weights and start resistance training. Because I think the public health implications from that are so profound that we are really missing out on an untapped resource there. And I want to try to write something that expresses that in the future.
Sounds awesome. If you could go back and speak to your 20-year-old self and give that guy some advice, what would you say?
Well, the first thing I would say is whatever it is, do it now. I'm 53 currently, and when you get to this age, you kind of have that, holy shit, how did I get here feeling? Because, I moved to the area where I currently live when I was 33, and those 20 years have gone by like a puff of smoke. And everything goes by very quickly, and the things you want to do, you need to do, and you need to understand that they all take longer than you think they're going to.
Yeah.
So the first thing is to do it now. And the second thing that I would tell myself, but more importantly that I would tell readers your age, or listeners your age and younger, is this. Whatever it is that you want to do, even if you feel like you don't have adequate education for it or that there are roadblocks to it, whatever it is you think that you want to do, just go do it. Start now and do it. Because your motto in this day and age, with the internet, self-publishing, YouTube, Vimeo, podcasts like what you're doing, we talked about your stats over the course of a year.
Yeah.
Look what you've done in a year. The thing is, what everyone out there needs to understand is the days of a middleman and the days of the gatekeeper are over. If you want to do something, you just go do it right now and get started. You'll suck at it at first, but, the old saying that Arthur Jones liked to say is good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. To get that, just go out and get started and do it, and do not pay any attention or any heed to anyone that tries to insert themselves between you and what you want to do, whether that is some sort of middleman or gatekeeper, licensing, regulation, whatever. Just go do it.
That is awesome advice. Good stuff. Couple more questions, and then we'll finish up.
Okay.
Aside from brief, infrequent, high-intensity training, what do you believe that other people think is insane?
Well, nowadays, what I believe that other people don't believe or believe is insane is that capitalism and free and unfettered markets are not dog eat dog. They are exactly the opposite. They are the pinnacle of benevolence and human kindness, because therein all exchange is voluntary and beneficial to both parties. And if anyone tries to game the system or fix prices, someone will come along and undercut you. So that all transactions become benevolent and honest. And the thing that is great about free and unfettered markets and capitalism is the price system. And what the price system does is it takes any failings of the process and puts them out front in bold relief for everyone to see. And that's why capitalism is so easy to beat up. And the difference between other systems of running an economy and running a society is that they try to hide all their mistakes. And that's where people can start to garner power and influence, and where you get all the negative aspects of a society and a market. Is where you start to peddle, pull, and influence rather than merit and benevolence. So that's the thing that I really strongly believe that no one else seems to, and I feel very alone in.
I don't think you're completely alone, but no, that was a really good answer. Good stuff. Okay. One last key question, and we'll move on to just how people can find you.
Okay.
If you had one billboard that you could put anywhere, where would you put it, and what would it say?
Well, I think what it would say is do it now. Where I would put it, it doesn't have to be a particular location, but the billboard would be by the side of a highway where the traffic always comes to a complete stop. Because the people that are on that commute may be stuck in a situation and thinking of doing something else. So I would find a place where the traffic backs up to and from work every day, and I put the billboard there, and it would say, do it now.
No, I love that. That's good. Cool. Okay, so Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, but I suppose the contact details probably stay the same. It's still so URL drmcguff.com.
Yeah, so the way to find that is drmcguff.com, so drmcguff.com. The blog for Body by Science is Body by Science, all strung together, bodybyscience.net. But the way to engage me in all the realms that I operate in is probably the easiest is to go through drmcguff.com. That'll click to, social media, Instagram, Twitter, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've noticed you're much more present on social media these days, particularly Instagram. It's quite a lot of progress you've made from when we last spoke.
That's what happens when you got a 12-year-old.
Good stuff. For all the listeners, please head over to corpwarrior.com, CORP warrior.com, which will redirect you to the homepage, which is a far longer URL, which you might not remember, where you'll be able to find all of the show notes and links mentioned during this interview. Good stuff. Okay, Doug, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I always learn so much. And, I wish you all the best of everything you're doing in the future, and I'll speak to you in the near future, I imagine. All
right, yeah, let's do it again sometime. It was a great time. I really appreciate it.
Nice one, Doug. Take care.
All right, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by hituni.com. That's hituni.com. Hit Uni is an e-learning course provider specializing in high-intensity training for personal trainers and for people looking to learn how to apply the principles of HIIT to their own training for best results. It comes highly recommended by Body by Science author Dr. Doug McGuff, Discover Strength CEO Luke Carlson, MedX Precision Fitness owner Blair Wilson, HIIT expert Drew Bay, and the founder of Living La Vida Low Carb, Jimmy Moore. It was founded by author and high-intensity training master personal trainer Simon Shawcross. Simon has 15 years experience and has supervised over 15,000 workouts. Due to a combination of demand and a lack of quality in certification programs in the fields of high-intensity training, Simon and his team spent the last 3 years developing top-quality courses that will educate fitness professionals and participants to enable them to train individuals and themselves in the safest manner and produce best results. HIT Uni has been put together using knowledge from the very best minds in the field of exercise, including Skylar Tanner, James Steele, Dr. Doug McGuff, Drew Bay, John Little, Mike Mensa, Arthur Jones, Dr. Ellington Darden, and many more. The courses are delivered online through the website, where you can learn via a variety of multimedia materials at your own pace and convenience. The online video presentations are engaging and make learning fun. Online support and a discussion forum are provided to resolve any sticking points and enable you to share ideas and ask for help. Depending on whether you want to become a personal trainer, are already a personal trainer who wants to upskill, or if you're a keen HIT participant that is eager to learn more about how you can apply HIT to your own workouts for maximum benefit, there are several great value courses to choose from. I am personally partway through the PT course and I'm really enjoying it. I primarily wanted to do the course to learn more about how to apply HIT to my own training for better results. The courses are really easy to follow and each section is organised into bite-sized chunks that give you a real sense of achievement after you complete each one. To get your exclusive Corporate Warrior 10% discount on any course you purchase, simply head on over to hituni.com, that's hituni.com, and enter the coupon code CW10, that's CW and the number 10. So again, head on over to hituni.com, hituni.com, pick your course and enter the coupon code CW10. Thanks very much for your support.